Mr. President, it is a particular pleasure for me to see you presiding over the General Assembly. As ambassador in the former Soviet Union for 5 years, I have had a long association with Ukraine, and I retain the fondest memories of my several visits to your beautiful country. You preside over an assembly that will deliberate crucial issues before the world community, on which your experience and guidance will be invaluable. I would also like to congratulate your predecessor, Ambassador Razali Ismail, on the engagement with which he acted during his presidency to carry out the work forward. Mr. Secretary General, I am delighted to see you here. We are celebrating in India the 50th anniversary of our emergence as a free nation. The constitutional moorings and the democratic forms which the new nation state has accepted and adopted rest on the vast foundation of civilizational experience and ethos. This explains the stability, coherence, and creative unity of the vast Indian society. There is a world in itself. The experience has wrought in us a deep conviction that while there are universally shared values and strivings, there can be no rigid prescriptions. We see the United Nations in this image as a crucible which will melt together our individual contributions to a world civilization, yet in recognition of the variety of historical and cultural experiences we bring to it. The Cold War cast an early shadow on the organization, creating a situation of ideological polarization. The non-aligned movement rejected this imposition of rigidity, representing an independent and responsible alternative to the worldview. This still remains so, and NAM retains the validity and relevance even after the disappearance of bloc rivalries. Non-alignment was not a byproduct of Cold War. Then it expressed the overwhelming need of previously colonized and disempowered nations to voice a perspective and an agenda in a politically and economically unequal and iniquitous world. Today, it remains a voice of reason and constructive engagement for the times ahead, which demand common purpose and contribution from all sides towards a convergence of intent on vital, even fateful, global concerns. Mr. President, since the creation of UN Charter, the world should have changed far more than it has in the half-century that has elapsed. Decolonization is almost complete, but the scars of colonization are still with us. The present bears a heavy burden on the past. South Africa is free, but racism rears its ugly head amidst us, often laced with xenophobia. Development, growth, even human dignity remain for much of the world a distant dream. We must insistently ask ourselves what we can decisively do at the United Nations to make the dreams of the hundreds of millions come true. How can we make the United Nations a more vibrant organization for the world community as a whole at a time when we need it more than ever? We have a United Nations that is better equipped to fully responding to the challenges of next century. As an organization, the United Nations must also evolve and adapt itself to a rapidly changing environment, the better to serve the core needs of the world community. As a country which places very great store on UN's capacity to contribute to international peace and security and to development, the two crucial priorities before the world community. India, like others, has a vital interest in a UN continually makes itself more responsive to needs of its member states and prepares itself to serve them better. This, we believe, is the objective of reform. We are hence very pleased that the Secretary General, immediately after taking office, made reforms one of his priorities, and we congratulate him for this commitment. Within the first 7 months of his tenure, he has produced a series of proposals of impressive breadth and scope. These are before us, and many have described this session as a reform General Assembly. My good wishes to you, Mr. Secretary General. We judge agenda for the reform by the measures I have described. We are supportive of all proposals that, in our view, will carry forward or improve the Secretariat's ability to respond to the mandates of the international community. We will express our thoughts constructively with the aim of strengthening the process and direction of reform to the collective advantage of the global community and the organization that it represents. We do not see reforms simply in an exercise of trim budget of the UN. Instead, reforms should contribute towards strengthening the UN and its capacity to respond effectively to the priorities identified by the overwhelming majority of its membership. The crisis that confronts the UN manifests itself in many ways. A financial crisis has resulted from the inability of some to fulfill their charter commitments and from laying down the preconditions to meet them. The UN does not have the means to execute programs that respond to the felt needs of priorities of its membership, precisely at this time when these are sorely needed. As a result, the UN is in danger of being marginalized as a global forum where decisions can be taken that truly respond to challenges of globalization. The solution lies not in piecemeal reform, but in building trust between nations and an acceptance that in international relations, democratic principles should be norm as much as they are increasingly accepted in the national governments. Mr. President, in our view, the international peace and security and development are inextricably linked. The one is impossible to achieve without the other. Over the last 6 or 7 years, there has been a growing emphasis on the political aspect of the task of development, such as democracy and human rights. Unless underlying causes of underdevelopment, poverty, and social alienations are effectively addressed and removed, this emphasis will remain unrealized. Therefore, the single most important target that the United Nations should set itself is the promotion of sustained economic growth in developing countries that will lead to the eradication of poverty and erase the tensions and pressures that have led to the collapse of governance in social order in several states and to conflicts between others. International peace and stability will be enhanced only when all countries enjoy minimum standard of economic self-sufficiency and well-being. Therefore, we believe that the thrust of the reform proposals in the UN should make the promotion of sustained economic development the principal cross-sectoral issue for the secretarial program. We believe that there are enough intergovernmental mandates to permit the Secretariat to tailor programs towards this end. The universality of human rights, to which we all are committed ourselves, almost 5 years ago in Vienna, expresses itself at one level in the international norms for promotion and protection of human rights, and our collective efforts to foster respect of these standards. At a deeper plane, this universality stems from the search in different civilizations for the ways of protecting human dignity of every individual. Next year, as we celebrate 50th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we will reflect whether the ideals enshrined in the Declaration have become a reality for the people in all parts of the world. As we do so, we must build confidence in the process that encourages introspection and self-criticism. Dialogue and consultations rather than confrontation and judgment. The Declaration calls for the advent of a world order which human beings shall enjoy freedom of speech and belief and freedom from fear and want as the highest aspirations of the common people. It recognizes the importance of economic, social and cultural rights as well as their interdependence with civil and political rights. Full realization of all these rights is what will give true meaning to the quest for human dignity embodied in the Universal Declaration. India's approach to the observance and promotion of human rights is inspired by the holistic version of the Universal Declaration and the Indian Constitution. A strong constitutional framework, mutually enforcing safeguards, both within and outside this framework, a policy of transparency and responsiveness to civil society, and cooperation with the UN human rights system. In particular, the treaty bodies are main elements of this approach in the areas of civil and political rights. Equally, if not more important, are the assault on poverty and underdevelopment, promotion of awareness of the rights, and a policy of affirmative action for the upliftment of socially and economically vulnerable sections of society. This is a complex task, especially in a country of India's diversity, and many times when the state has faltered, civil society has stepped in. In India, as elsewhere, individuals have wrought miracles by working outside the established systems and going beyond traditional modes of thought. In recent times, the most moving example is that of a frail, sari-clad woman, Mother Teresa, whose fathomless compassion and soothing touch would be missed by millions of Indians. I would like to pay tribute to this apostle of mercy, who rendered service to millions of poor and the suffering, not only in India, but all over the world, and brought them hope. While development must be our supreme objective, to get there, we also need peace, stability, and security. The dangers that threaten us have been, for the last 50 years, increasingly more frightening than any that have cast their shadow over the mankind in the entire history. Development of nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons to destroy the whole population. We have decided, as an international community, to outlaw the production, possession, and use of chemical and biological weapons. However, on the weapons of mass destruction, capable of total annihilation of human civilization, the global community has lived far too long on a diet of empty promises. The pretext for clinging to nuclear arsenals, which are questionable at any time, have now vanished. Mere non-proliferation treaties, promoted as disarmament measures, only serve to entrench a nuclear monopoly. No credible steps towards striving to realize the nuclear weapon-free world are contemplated, much less taken by those who should be showing the way. No justification can be proffered as during the Cold War. The patience of the world community, expressed through International Court of Justice, enlightened voices from the former believers of deterrence, political and general opinion, and weighty voluntary initiatives, is starting to wear thin. Nuclear weapon powers owe it to the world to answer the question why they need the nuclear weapons. Global opinion wants a nuclear weapons convention, as already outlined, for the class of biological and chemical weapons, and will not rest till it is achieved. We appeal to the nuclear weapon states to align their policies to what the world wants. We see the United Nations as a forum in which international community must continue to demand universal nuclear disarmament, and we expect, therefore, that the Secretariat's program will support these intergovernmental objectives. Under the Charter, the Security Council was constituted as a body on which the general membership conferred the responsibility for maintenance of international peace and security, acting on its behalf. In recent years, the Security Council has been able to play a more active role in discharging its responsibilities. However, there is often a perception that the Council's actions have not always reflected the sentiments of general membership. It is imperative and time, therefore, the Security Council takes on as permanent members developing countries equipped to make an important contribution with their world views, historical experiences, civilizational values, so that decision of the Council truly reflects the UN's wider membership. Otherwise, Council's actions will be seen as progressively less representative precisely at a time when it is being called upon to act far more frequently than before on behalf of the world community. India has let it known from 1994 in this General Assembly that it is prepared to accept the responsibilities of permanent membership. We are the largest democracy in the world with ancient civilizational values and attainments and a worldview based on universal inspirations. Participative government reflect the diversity and pluralism, as well as readiness for constructive engagement in world's affairs. These strengths, we believe, would be an asset to an expanded Security Council. India, standing as one of the leading economies in the world, will be progressively strengthened, and we are prepared to bear in full responsibilities of permanent membership. India's long-standing participation in UN peacekeeping operations testifies that only to the dedication and professionalism of Indian soldiers, but also to the political will of the government to actively contribute to these operations. Mr. President, the core of our foreign policy is our keenness to pursue close ties and build confidence and cooperation with our neighbors, recognizing fully that we are the largest country in the region, not only in terms of size and population, but also economic capabilities. We extend our hand of friendship not in spirit of mere reciprocity, but in good faith, where we do expect reciprocity, which is related to size and capacity, is mutual respect for each other's territorial integrity and sovereignty. We seek to advance cohesion, synergy, and mutual goodwill in our neighborhood so that together we fully participate and derive benefits from the dynamic changes in the world is currently witnessing. Our approach has contributed to the setting in motion of a trend towards cooperation in our region. As a large and diverse economy, we are developing new partnerships that go beyond the region and revitalize the old cultural and commercial links. Politically, it is expressed in the active interest that we have taken in supporting the Middle East peace process. Our ties with the Arab world reaching deep into the history, and our strong fraternal ties with the developing countries in general and with Africa in particular. In our larger neighborhood, with which we have shared history, we have enhanced our engagement with the ASEAN as a full dialogue partner and as a participant in the ASEAN Regional Forum, while maintaining our traditional relationships with the United States, Russia, the European Union, and Japan. We have also been strengthening global trends in regional cooperation by actively promoting cooperation among the countries of Indian Ocean Rim and trying to recover the cultural and commercial connectivities that have existed since time immemorial and which were snapped by the colonial era. Mr. President, the global society is seeking to find equilibrium between the opposing pulls gathered by the forces of globalization, nationalism, subnationalisms. Indeed, it is difficult to see just how they can be balanced. Yet, they must be, or else the potential of international configuration will be immense. Hence, the absolute need for extreme caution to prevent established nation-states from being destabilized, either through too hasty push towards globalization or the pull of the subnational demands. We see this as a challenge which we will have to face collectively as well as individually. A global menace threatens international peace, and to which open democracy are particularly vulnerable. This is terrorism. It takes innocent lives indiscriminately, brings fear into the lives of the others, and shatters the peaceful existence and normal growth of entire communities. Terrorism should be anathema to the international community because it is antithesis of every ideal that UN Charter enshrines. Its main vehicle is violence. Its aim is destruction rather than development. Its doctrines are founded on intolerance and in the means it uses and the effect it has. It destroys human rights utterly. Incitement to terrorism and complicity in participation in terrorism from across the borders undermine the international system. And even though very few societies are free from these clutches, we still have not developed a global strategy to defeat this evil. The resolve is absent. It is important that we find it, not the least because terrorism is a global web spanning all countries and continents and quickly building links with other global menaces, the drugs. We in India see in our region how deadly poison this mix of terrorism and drugs is. The United Nations should take lead in determined global action to root out these scourges. Protection and preservation of environment is an area to which all of us attach highest importance. The commitment for global partnership for preventing further degradation of environment made at the Rio Summit in 1992 was reiterated, and the need for effective implementation of Agenda 21 reaffirmed during the special session of the General Assembly in June this year. All the elements of Agenda 21 have to be implemented in full, and we need to accelerate the process of such implementation. Any partial or non-comprehensive implementation will be detrimental not only to the international cooperation in this area, but also to the threatened stability of Earth's fragile environment. In this connection, it is our hope that the spirit of Convention of Climate Change and the Berlin Mandate will be fully encompassed in the protocol for legal instruments to emerge from the Kyoto Conference to be held in December 97. What has been touched upon, Mr. President, represents huge challenges beyond the capacity of any country to face it alone. This is why it is so vital for the United Nations, now more than ever before, to be a forum where we can pool creative ideas and lessen our experience to assist each other. And to assist us in understanding and coping with these challenges. This is the ultimate rationale of reform. We will be ready to work with other countries to rebuild the United Nations in the image of our collective aspirations and as our trusted instrument to meet the challenges of approaching century. Mr. President, addressing the 15th regular session of General Assembly, I recall India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, saying here in 1960, and I quote, "The main purpose of the United Nations is to build up a world without a war, a world based on cooperation of nations and people. It is not merely a world where war is kept in check for a balancing armed forces. It is much deeper than that. It is a world from which major causes of war have been removed and social structures built upon which further peaceful cooperation within a nation as well as between nations." Unquote. It is in this spirit, Mr. President, that we should approach the task before us. I do hope and pray that under your guidance and under the spirited leadership of the Secretary General, these objectives will be achieved. Thank you.